look back in hindsight. Everything is 2020 in hindsight. We make mistakes, we're learning from it in hindsight.
What if the real enemy to your success is your own mind? Think about that. I know somebody out there is probably saying, bull crap, my boss sucks. I don't have I was born on first base, or whatever analogy we want to use, right? But just really think about that question and take all of that noise out, because today I have my guy here, Dr. Kevin Gazzara, and you tell me if I pronounced it right or wrong. I did my best.
You got it right there, Lee.
All right. He's an executive coach, leadership expert, and former Intel manager who now helps leaders shift from reactivity to resilience using a tool set called positive intelligence. Through decades of research, coaching, and experience in high-pressure environments, Kevin has cracked the code on leading with emotional fitness and clarity. And I just want to say welcome to Hindsight. Kevin, how are you doing today?
Fantastic. Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing me with your listeners today.
Man, I tell you what, I'm sharing you with me right now, selfishly, because, I like to talk about mindset, because what I believe, and I won't say for everybody else, but for me, I'm starting to crack the code in a sense on understanding that my mind is telling me stories in every situation, in every scenario, right? So today we want to focus more on just being successful and how your mind plays a role in that. And then maybe you can give us some strategies, some tips, things to look out for, things we can use in place of these situations where we just maybe feeling down or don't know how to handle certain situations when we're under that pressure. Okay.
Be glad to do that for sure.
All right. Now, before we get started, this is Hindsight. So tell us a little bit about just a teeny bit about who you are, like how you got to this place of leadership coaching.
Well, let's see. Originally from Pennsylvania, did all my undergraduate work in engineering and business at Drexel, did an MBA, and then ultimately went and did all my doctoral work in organizational leadership. So my passion is there. I spent about 30 years in the corporate world, 10 years at Transamerica Corporation, and then almost 20 years at Intel. And when I retired from Intel in 2007, I had a personal goal that I wanted to retire at 50, and I was fortunate to be able to do that. And my goal was in 2007, I took two of my colleagues with me, and we started up a firm called Magna Leadership Solutions. And our goal was, to go work with organizations that, didn't have $10 million budgets like we had, and help their leaders kind of build better leaders. And, when I was at Intel, I came in as a project manager. I was a general manager for them, but ultimately I found kind of this passion for teaching and learning about leadership and building teams. And then the last 6 years before I left, I was managing Intel's management leadership development for first and midline manager programs for the world. And what that looked like was we used to do 2,500 managers and leaders in 10 different countries each year. And when I left, we had just finished training our 40,000th manager. So I got pretty good at that. And I thought, well, why not take this to companies that, could really use it, that were, small to mid-size firms. And that's what we've been doing for 18 years. Every year has been better than the last. So no complaints.
Yeah. Wow. That's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing. And that's awesome. And I got to retire before 52, but I did it a different way. I did it with the Army. So, not working at Intel, but being in the Army. And in the Army, there's perceptions about our leadership or the leadership of the military and how it's just go, 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 ho, 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 right? Ho is something that the Army say when we're either, you gotta dig deep or you're doing great. It's one of those terms that you use. Ho! So, but what I want to say is most people, and I'm using that, when I say most people, I don't know most people, but most people think leadership is about pushing harder under pressure. But you say it starts with managing your own mind. What opened your eyes to that, besides all that magnificent training that you've been doing?
Boy, you know, I think what really opened my mind was seeing what the difference was when when I was managing teams and acting in a leadership position. So let me first kind of define. So management is really much more kind of about managing tasks, and leadership is much more about developing relationships and so forth. And managing tasks is typically a short-term focus, and leading is a long-term focus. And the best leaders are really, what I have found is the best leaders do both of them. They do management when necessary, and they keep focused on leadership. And if you can do that, and you can maintain those relationships long term, you can be successful. I think the thing I found was people that were trying to be leaders, but were really just kind of managers, were, as you're describing, kind of that push, may get the results in short term, but long term, it doesn't work. And I think the real way to tell is, if you pull the individual out, whether they're a manager or trying to act as a leader, the real question is does the team members' behavior still stay the same, right? Do they still keep doing? If you remove that, in fact, I had some people that I'd worked with who were in the military, and they were kind of trying to debate me about, I had this drill sergeant and he was, our leader and so forth. And my question to them was, all the stuff that the drill sergeant was making you do, if you remove that person completely, would you keep doing the same thing? And the answer was, well, no, we probably wouldn't. We wouldn't do that. And I say, well, that's because he's managing rather than leading, right? So I think you still have to have a little bit of both, right, to push people. Ultimately, if you only manage, you can get results, but it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to retain them long term.
Yeah, I love to tell this story, and I'll be really brief about it. When I was in the Army, I was at Fort Drum, and we had to deploy to Bosnia for peacekeeping mission. We had a leader, and I don't know if you're familiar with Black Hawk Down.
Of course,
but
yes.
Yeah, but the Ranger, Captain Steele, was our battalion commander when I was at Fort Drum. No, I didn't go and deal with that. But he was our commander. That had happened to him prior to it. And I loved him as a leader and probably as a manager as well, but more of a leader. He used to take us, we would go on a 5-mile run around the post. And then this one morning, we got to a open field and there was a square, like a boxing ring, boxing gloves on each side. And he said, you know what? He didn't even say, you know what? He said, line up behind the gloves. And he said, I don't care if the guy in front of you is 305 and you're a $105, life ain't fair, suck it up. And everybody just had to fight, whoever was there. But then after that, he gave us a story and he told us how we're going into someone else's neighborhood, right? And we have to be strong in the face of them because we're in their house at this point, right? And we don't want to be disrespected. We just want to go take care of business. So my point is, he would get us prepared physically. He would get us prepared mentally to fight anything that comes in our way. And then he would further enhance that mental by explaining why, the reason why. So I just like to tell that story because, the military is a lot. I mean, it's a lot of fighting. It's a lot of training. It's a lot of physicalities, but it's also a whole lot of mental, just how you perceive things. And that's why you see the commercials where you see everybody running one way and the military running towards the firefight, right? Yep. I mean, that's just how it is. That's not normal, right? So you got to train the mind on that one. So anyway, thank you for letting me tell my story a little bit.
Sure. There's a book that I had read many years ago. I was actually I was speaking at the Fast Company conference, and there was a gentleman there. This is many years ago, I was still at Intel, uh, by a guy by the name of Mike Abershoff. I don't know if you recognize that name, but he had a book called "It's Your Ship." And if anybody hasn't read that and you want to read a great book about leadership, there's a lot of great books on leadership, but this one in particular, and it was about Mike taking the worst ship in the Navy to becoming the best ship, and that was his goal. And he was there as one of the keynote speakers, and he really talked about the importance of relationship, of listening to your people, of recognizing that you're not the expert in everything, appreciating and exploring opportunities. And it's just really a great story about how to do things different within the system, and at the same time allow people to feel part of it, as opposed to, command and control, which is normally associated with, military environments.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. I want to ask you to bust a myth.
Okay.
Bust a myth. Bust a myth for us. What's something about mindset or positive thinking that people get totally wrong?
Let's think about that. Well, I think they get a couple things wrong. I think one of the myths is that, you're born with a certain mindset, or you're just wired for a certain mindset, and that's what you have to live with. And that is completely wrong. And there's some really, really good neuroscience that proves that we found that the brain is plastic, right? So it can be molded. And the more of mindset kind of activities that you do, the more what they call neuropathways that are built in the brain. So if you think that you're kind of stuck, and you're constantly thinking of things that are negative, or you're not looking at things as, you need to look at things as an opportunity or as a threat. You're always looking at them as a threat. I mean, that's the way that's evolutionarily how we're wired, right? We're wired to be cautious. And that was great when, you're going to get eaten by dinosaurs or wild animals. Today, not so much, although I think some people might argue in the corporate world that's pretty common, where you're going to get eaten alive. It's a different kind of eaten alive. So I think the myth of, this is the way I am, and there are certain people that are born one way, and I wasn't, so I have to stay that way. That's not the case. Now, there is good research that says that our brains are not nature and nurture. That many people are born with a very different mindset, a kind of attuned to being kind of more positive, forward looking, looking at things as opportunities, and other ones that are not. And it's about 50% that kind of contributes to that. The other 50% is the nurture piece. It's the things that you do to change that. And if you're born with the positive mindset, which I think I was, you can build upon it, to kind of take it to the next level. If you're built with a negative mindset, or what Carol Dweck at University of Phoenix or University of Pennsylvania would say is, you're born with a fixed mindset, that you can still change that. You may not be able to get to that other extreme level that the person that was born with the growth mindset, but you can get there, and you can still kind of both live in that kind of higher, more positive plane.
Yeah. I think, I try to be positive and optimistic, but I think one of the myths is, I mean, you can live in that state, but you gotta remember being realistic as well. And sometimes being positive, and I don't have a great example, but just sometimes being positive is awesome, right? And having a positive mindset is great in a lot of situations, but you also have to be realistic and realize that there may be some things that you have to do to get to what you're trying to achieve. and just thinking positive that it's going to happen isn't always, it's not always going to happen. You know what I mean? There are some things that have to happen that you have to do personally to make it happen. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. Hope is not a strategy, and just hoping that you're going to get there just doesn't work. I think one of the best tools that I've kind of had in my toolbox over the past 4 or 5 years in particular is positive intelligence, right? And just for the listeners, probably many of you have heard about emotional intelligence, right? EQ, right? And that was developed and really made popular by Daniel Goleman at Rutgers back in the 90s. And EQ is really about kind of understanding ourselves, understanding others, understanding our motivation, and then also a degree of control of both our emotions as well as our control of how we deal with others. And Goleman's work, I used a lot of Goleman's work in my doctoral research and so forth that I did on motivation and engagement. And he has a wonderful compendium of research that he has done that shows that everyone has a different, EQ level. Everybody has a different IQ level. He says we have different EQ, emotional intelligence. And there is some really good correlations with the best leaders. If you look at their EQ, it's usually very, very high, close to, it's a 0 to 100 scale. But one of the things that I always was a little bit challenged with Goleman's work was his work is much more what I call descriptive than prescriptive. That you read it, there's lots of things that you can do, but there wasn't really a prescription, kind of a checklist that you can do in order to say, hey, I want to move my EQ from 60 to 80 or whatever. There's lots of things that you can do. There wasn't any kind of direct correlations. And there's a gentleman that came out with a book called Positive Intelligence. Also, I highly recommend everybody to read that. And what he said was that we really have these. We have two parts of our brain. We have what he calls the saboteur brain, and the sage brain. And the saboteur brain, there's 10 saboteurs that all of us have. And the good news for any of the listeners is you can go and take the PQ assessment for free. That will identify your saboteurs. It'll also identify that degree of that level that we're looking for, with regard to sage to saboteur. 100% is your 100% sage. You're looking at everything as an opportunity. You're forward looking and so forth. It's pretty unrealistic to be able to get there. Moving towards that is a good thing. And what the author Shirzad Chamine has said is that there's this tipping point that once you get 2/3 of your brain working in the sage mode, you can control your saboteurs. And let me describe for you kind of the 10 saboteurs. So there's this master saboteur, which he calls the judge, right? We all have that, and it's judging ourselves, it's judging others, and it's judging the environment, right? And that's kind of the master saboteur. And under that, there are 9 saboteurs, and the listeners will discover this through the assessment. And I'll give you the link when we're done here to take that you have the controller saboteur, which, basically your saboteur says you have to control everything. You can't let things out beyond that. You have the hyperachiever, which is you're trying to do more and more and more. And once you accomplish that goal, then the hyperachiever is telling you, okay, now you have to do more. You have to do more. And you just never really get to where you want. You have the kind of the restless saboteur that's always kind of constantly worrying, thinking about other things and woulda, coulda, shoulda type of thing. You have the stickler. Stickler saboteur is really focused, can't get out of the minutiae, always wants more and more data. I can do it better and better and better and better. And sometimes, good enough, is good enough. You have the pleaser type. I've worked with a lot of pleasers where they don't like conflict, and basically they just continue to take things on to the point where they just explode or get overloaded. You have the hypervigilant saboteur, which is once again very, very similar to the stickler, where you're worrying about details and you're worrying about what could happen. You're like, you put something in place and then you're thinking about all this other stuff that could happen, and you're constantly spending all your energy checking in there. You have the avoider saboteur, right? That just says, okay, let's not deal with that, very much like the pleaser, and so forth. And then you have the victim, which is, it's all like anything everything is happening to me instead of for me. And the last saboteur, which is my strongest saboteur, is the hyper rational, right? That the belief of the hyper rational saboteur is you can turn everything into something quantitative, right? That it's not emotionally driven. Like everything can be solved. There's an equation for everything. It's all just about the data. And the thing is what Shahzad talks about in the book is that all the saboteurs are kind of like a hot stove, right? If you're putting your hand on a hot stove, the saboteurs want you to hold your hand on the stove. And what you really want is you want to use the saboteurs in a very positive way to be able to say, oh, that's hot, let me pull it off. And then you use your sage brain, through lots of different things like empathizing, exploring, and innovating, and navigating, so forth, that you want to use your sage brain to get you there. And if you can do that, if you can train your brain through building these neural pathways, most of that's done through continuous habitual repetitive practice around doing mindfulness type of things, or meditation, or really being able to kind of clear that mind chatter out of your head on a regular basis, because that's where all of this innovation and all of this creativity kind of lives.
Yeah. So how disruptive are those saboteurs?
They're incredibly disruptive, right? And they are, everybody has some of them. I found a few people have all of them. Most people have them to a different degree. I think of the 10, I have 7, and then I have 3 at zeros, and the assessment will kind of give you a score from 0 to 10 of what they are, and it just depends on their intensity. People that have their top 3 at 10s, typically they're incredibly loud. People that have the top 3 at 5s and 6s, they're just moderate. And the more you can, the more that you can keep them quiet, because you don't want them to turn things off. It's like a hot stove. If you didn't have those senses in your hand, you just keep it there to the point where you just burned your whole hand off, right? So you don't want that. The key is you want to be able to say, hey, thanks for letting me know this is hot, and now I'm going to go do something, as opposed to just ignoring it.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I like that. I'm gonna ask you now, and then I'm gonna ask you then. Where can you do the assessment at?
Yeah. So I've created a link that will kind of a fast start link for, if you go to PQ, Positive Intelligence, PQ trainingandcoaching.com, you'll get a little pop-up. If you put your name in there, you'll get a quick start guide, and it'll walk you through all the places on the Positive Intelligence site of how to find the assessments, how to use them, and so forth. You can go directly to the positiveintelligence.com site as well. I found it a little bit a little more challenging to navigate. So this will kind of help you navigate it, and it'll give you a very prescriptive steps of, here's what you do first, here's what you do second, here's how you read it, and so forth. So there's lots and lots of information there.
All right, I love it. All right, this is Hindsight, and I do like to get into my people's business. So can you take us back to a moment when when your old way of thinking almost cost you, and how a shift in mental fitness changed everything for you?
Boy, I think
I made it.
I think the biggest mental shift that I had was, so I spent, almost 30 years in the corporate world. And by the way, the corporate world for me, and I think for many people, was really a great experience. And I don't think I would have done anything differently. It gave me the foundation, it allowed me to build my network, allowed me to expand my education. I got to learn and see some of the most amazing managers and leaders in my lifetime. I got to work with um, you know incredibly well-known leaders like Andy Grove, who started Intel, um, and be able to see those individuals in action, and it really made an impression for me. Um, and I had, as I mentioned, I had this goal to kind of retire at 50, or I call it retirement. My wife doesn't call it retirement, but move into my next phase of life. And I was fortunate to be
Yeah.
able to do that. I think one of the biggest things, one of the good things that I had done, which many people don't do, is that when you leave the kind of the safe world, where you have that paycheck and benefits and everything else, and every day is kind of scripted out for you. When you leave that world, whether it's voluntarily or involuntarily, I think most people end up getting downsized, or get caught kind of in a change, and ultimately the job goes away, and it's not a smooth transition where you have a plan for it. I think one of the big things that I had done is when I left the corporate world, I took two of my colleagues with me, Dr. Ali Lakhani and Marlene Lundy. And Dr. Lakhani was actually a doctoral student of mine. He was also working in Intel, and I was fortunate enough to work with him on his dissertation. And Marlene had worked for me and with me for 6 years, so a proven entity, and we started it up together. So the thing that I would say is that starting off as a team rather than a solopreneur was a really, really big advantage. And I find that most people that I meet don't do that, right? That they do it on their own. And having people that complement your skill sets, I think, is very, very important. And that's what we were able to do, and able to kind of build a firm that's, we've been in business 18 years, and, every year is better than the past.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you mentioned earlier that you had 7 of those saboteurs that have been identified. Like, what's one of those saboteurs or eternal critics that you personally struggle with, even as a successful leader, and how did you learn to quiet it?
Great question. The strongest one for me, as I mentioned before, was the hyper rational. I have a restless saboteur because I like to do lots and lots of different things. Um, but the hyper rational one is the biggest one. And what I recognized, and it kind of drove me to some additional research as well on it, like why this was happening, not just what was happening, is I always believed that you could turn everything into a rational discussion. And what I found is the way I like to think about it is that if you think about your brain, I think of this brain as having this wall around the center of your brain, which is your rational brain, and you have this emotional brain all around. And I think as someone with a hyper rational saboteur, my goal is always to try to either jump higher over the wall or try to break down the wall, rather to get to the hyper rational. And 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 rather than doing that, what I've recognized, not only from a personal perspective, or professional perspective, but also a personal perspective, is that sometimes you have to take a breath. You have to sit back, and when I'm dealing with someone, whether it's a client whether it's someone, an executive that I'm coaching, whether it's my kids or my grandkids. What I have to recognize is if there's some emotional things that are happening, trauma or a distraction, just trying to get to the rational and have the conversation is very, very difficult. I would say it's kind of like putting lipstick on a pig. Two reasons you don't want to put lipstick on a pig. One is because they don't really have lips, and two, it just has a tendency to annoy the pig. So,
Yeah.
so what I recognize is sometimes you need to take that breath. You need to get that emotional wall lowered, right, or broke through, and then you have the rational conversation. But just pushing harder without paying attention to that emotional blockade that's happening there is really frustrating for you, and equally as frustrating, if not more frustrating, to the other individual. So that I would say is the technique that I've used is, and Shazad talks this about, these 2-minute, what they call PQ reps, right? And it's really mindfulness or meditation kind of things where you're backing off, you're breathing, getting more oxygen in you, allowing a little bit of reflective time, recognizing that the emotional piece is as important, it may be more important than the rational piece. And then moving into coach mode, right? Most people don't know the difference, or don't recognize the difference between a coach or a consultant, or a psychotherapist even. And a coach is really much more about kind of assessing the environment and asking the right questions as a guide, as a facilitator for the other person to be able to walk through why this emotional piece is happening. And if you can do that, rather than consulting, which is much more about giving them solutions of here's what you need to do, so forth, is getting them to raise that self-awareness thing of like, oh, there is this emotional thing that's happening. Let's deal with that. And then once we get through that, then let's have that next level of conversation. And it's asking the right questions. It's listening. It's feeding back, saying, here's what I heard. And we teach something in our Leading Forward Academy. We have a 6-month leadership program that we do for lots of companies around the world. One of the things we tell people to do is you always want to do observation without interpretation. Right. And what that means is that if I was coaching you, Lee, and I recognize that there's some emotional things going on, and ultimately we're trying to get to a rational conversation. What I want to do is I want to give you feedback of things that I notice, rather than saying, hey, Lee, I noticed you today that you look really distracted, or you're unhappy or something. Those are all interpretive pieces. And what we know is sometimes they may be accurate, sometimes they might not, but our brain sees that as a threat, right? The minute that I start telling you some things, your brain is going to take that as a threat, and it's going to really shut off your ability to listen. And then you're going to be processing, why would Kevin say that? He's wrong on that, right? And you're off, kind of your brain's doing all of this mind chatter thing.
Yeah.
And you're not hearing anything. So the key is to provide some rather than interpretation, observation. I might say something like, hey, notice, when we started our conversation this morning, that you're usually smiling a lot, that you're, and I've noticed I haven't seen you smile as much as you did in the last 10 minutes or the last time that we met, or whatever, and then I say, and what's contributing or detracting to that, right? So I'm not going to ask you any why you're doing that, right? Also, why has that built-in bias, right? That I'm doing some judging. The saboteurs are coming out, and I got the judge there. So I don't want to. I'm not going to ask you any why questions. I'm going to ask you some facilitated questions of, and I did this with my wife right before the call, right? I noticed that rather than saying, hey, are you okay? You look tired or whatever, I noticed that she was extra quiet this morning. I said, hey, I noticed that you're extra quiet this morning, What's contributing to that? And she said, oh yeah, I've got, I woke up, I had a headache. I just took some Advil or Tylenol to help me out with that. Right. Rather than saying, hey, you look crappier. You don't look like you don't look like you're interested in having a conversation with me. That's all interpretive piece. That has a tendency to just create this extra conflict, and it's just not necessary.
Yeah, that is a great message. That is a great message, because we interpret things based off of, I don't even need to reiterate it. Like you just said it. That is a great message and a great lesson. In, another piece, while I was thinking, I know something that I usually tell my team is try to, in business, right? Try to eliminate some of the noise and tune into the message, right? Don't react to the noise, react to the message. And I say this a lot, and this is really quick. I had an incident when I was in the military, and I was a sergeant something. I can't remember my actual rank. And I had a warrant officer, and he came and he was telling me something in a very disrespectful way. Now, it's the Army, so that's neither here nor there, but I'm a human, right? So I felt that he was disrespectful, and I reacted negatively, right? And when I left, and so a warrant officer outranks a sergeant, any sergeant. Okay. So when I left, I was like, ooh, I think I might have just gotten myself in trouble. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I returned disrespect with disrespect. So nothing happened in that moment, but it was one of those aha moments. Like, you know what? It could have really backfired, and I would have been the one that was screwed. Even if I was right, even if I was right in this situation in the military, I would have been wrong and I would have lost.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So in that moment, you can't always respond. You can't always, and I love that message you just had. You can't always respond to the emotional side. You got to hear, what is this person trying to convey to me? What is this business owner trying to convey to me? What is this, tool crib operator trying to convey to me? Hear that message. And then try to respond to that. But what you also got to do is nurture that relationship. Because I'm not saying that you need to tolerate disrespect. Like, you need to do those coaching questions, do the opportunity to build that relationship and figure out why they're coming at you that way. Right. So it's a lot of work, man. But that mindset that we're talking about plays a big role in if you're going to develop that relationship or if you're just going to destroy it.
Yeah. And there's some things, Lee, that we teach in the Leading Forward Academy. I'll give you some of kind of the snippets of it for the listeners. Is, there's a few things about leadership, the really the best, if you really look at the best leaders, they develop more leaders, right? So they're providing kind of role model behaviors for you. It doesn't sound like that individual was doing some role model behaviors at the time. So to lead the best,
or ever. I just want to put that out there. I can say it now, but go ahead.
Yeah. So if so the first thing is the best leaders are going to build other leaders. The other thing is that we, there's a couple kind of foundational pieces that we teach and we kind of drill into to the participants, on a regular basis throughout our. We have a 6-month program that we do this in. A couple of things. The first thing that we start out with is they're talking about mindset. Is we say the first thing we want you to do, and we're going to start every session like this that we do, is that we want you to maintain this mindset of I'm the problem or I'm contributing to the problem. That's the very first thing. So like any situation that you're going into, just like your example, the best leaders really have kind of taken that knowledge acquisition and turned it into true learning and wisdom to be able to say, hey, what, to start out, what could I have done differently? What can I do differently in the future? Why did that happen? These are all internal questions that you want to work through, and you want to start there, right? And if you start there, typically what we find is that a good portion, I don't know what the percentage is, probably better than 50%, is a lot of the conflict that could have happened is avoided, right? Because a lot of times you recognize, oh, I didn't give that other person proper instructions, or wasn't enough detail, or I didn't respect them maybe I didn't show respect in a way that he or she appreciated, right? So kind of starting there of either you're the problem or you're contributing to a problem is always beneficial. And then the second thing that we teach that kind of builds off of that is that leaders give the other person, as you demonstrated in your example, give the other person the first opportunity to look or be successful, right? And what that means is rather than confronting them, there's the old adage of you praise in public and you punish in private, is that you always want to give the other person, even if they're having bad behavior, that you always want to give them the opportunity to look or be successful and kind of maintain that control. As long as there's not physical violence, that's a different kind of conversation, is to be able to allow them to have that level of control, right? And at a point in time after you've kind of gone back into, after the event has happened, go back into I'm the problem or I'm contributing to the problem, figure out what's happening, and then in an environment that most likely a private environment, is to be able to kind of have a conversation with that individual. You might want to, your brain's probably going, this guy is such a jerk and an idiot and I don't want to deal with him. And as you've kind of mentioned, it's probably an ongoing thing. So there's probably whatever he's doing to you, he's probably doing to a lot of other people, and be able to be kind of contributing to the kind of success or the behavior change for that individual. And then you use, what they would teach in, like when I did all my coaching certs, they would teach you all to do this is you don't want to use the word why. You want to just talk about, so what is happening, or here's what I observed in our last conversation. You raised your voice, use these particular words, and I'm trying to figure out, what could have happened differently. I'd love to be able to hear your ideas. And then the other thing you can do is when they teach you about communication, they teach you to use open-ended questions. And I do not like open-ended questions. And the reason is because people, particularly if you have teenagers, they're masters of turning open-ended questions into closed-ended questions. Like you'd say, hey, tell me a little bit about how things go with that math test you had today. Okay, it's good, right? They turn it into
good.
And what you really want them to talk is to talk through. And what we found out our brain really loves is it really loves a challenge. So rather than saying to my daughter about that math test that she's worked about, it's like I would say something along this lines is, hey, I know you were struggling with this type of problem. Tell me one thing that you did to deal with those problems during the test. And that metric, that one thing, or tell me two things, or whatever number that you want to give them, the brain says, ooh, this is a challenge. I'm going to do this. And then they're going to jump in and say, yeah, well, remember I was studying this, I don't like dealing with word problems. Here's what I did, right?
Oh.
And then there's going to be enough information in there, because it would be very, very difficult for them to just say, well, I don't know. Well, they could say, and you can continue to probe there, but giving them that numeric challenge has a tendency, and rather than calling an open-ended question, we call them open-ended requests, where you have that request for that numeric 1, 2, 3, whatever you want to use. And if you can do that, what happens is it maintains the conversation as a dance back and forth, rather than, what we typically do is we try to use open-ended question, and then they go, I don't know, it didn't work, or yeah, it went fine. And now you feel awkward, they feel awkward, and ultimately the conversation goes nowhere, or you just split up and say, okay, that's good, and you never really accomplish what your original intent was.
Yeah. Dang, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Hard to do. Hard.
It is
Easy to understand. Hard to become an expert at.
In practice, right? Exactly. And I'm thinking about a lot of different opportunities. I can, get better at that. And I'm always looking to get better at communicating more effectively. And then getting out, because you talked about the difference between coaching and, I don't know, what was the other thing
Consulting.
opposite of coaching? Or consulting.
Yeah.
He said, coaching and consulting. And, I remember one of my bosses, we had a book club that we were in, and it was a book. I cannot remember the name. I was trying to remember the name, but it was talking about coaching and all of the things that you spoke about. Let them figure out what's going on, right? So developing those questions to pull information out of them so they can get that boom, aha, oh, okay. Right. And then that empowers them as well. Like it empowers them. Oh, I can figure these things out myself, or, I'm not depending on whatever scenario it is. Right. They believe and they know, and now they understand that they are able to solve problems themselves. Right. And they're empowered. So that's part of coaching from that perspective.
Yeah. And I would say it's the teach the man to fish kind of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing I've learned in coaching, and, I have a website, coachsultants.com is my coaching site. And what I find is most of the executives that hire me, or the managers that hire me for one of their executives, what I found is most of them hire me as a coach, but they need a combination, right? That many of them don't have the tools. Right. You always, in pure coaching, it's always about asking the right questions. It's about listening, reading the other person, helping them kind of guide. But a lot of times they really don't have the right tools or the processes to be successful. And that's where I take the coach hat off and I say, okay, we're going to go into consulting hat. And I'm going to give you some tools that you can use this week to kind of work through that. But continuing to probe, recognizing they don't have the tools to be able to get there, is, it's futile. It's like putting that lipstick on a pig again.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to try this real quick because I got a question in front of me, but I want to do an open-ended question that has a metric that I'm trying to play. So Kevin, you've been successful with working with leaders.
Yes.
Right. And getting them to,
I would say that's true.
To kind of tune into their mindset
and up their game.
Give me and up their game. All right, I can't do it with this question.
You can do it. You can do it with any question. I'm going to challenge you here. Give me like one thing that you want.
But I am going to ask you one thing. But if a leader is listening to this right now and they're feeling overwhelmed or burnt out, like what's one positive intelligence exercise or idea that they can apply this week to feel more grounded?
I think the thing that the one thing that they can do that's easiest to do is doing mindfulness activity, a mindfulness activity. And just people talk about mindfulness and meditation and so forth. And in the past, I've tried the meditation piece. My roommate in college was big into meditation. I'd wake up in the morning and he'd be sitting in the middle of the room in the lotus position, humming mantras for 45 minutes. And that worked for him. And I tried it and it just never really resonated with me. A mindfulness activity is doing these really short PQ or bursts of activity, and it's I'll show for people that are just listening, is if you just take two fingers on either hand or both hands simultaneously, and you rub them together. That's one of the tactile mindfulness activities. And the key is not just to move them together, is really to focus on them and think about, first of all, making sure you're maintaining a good breaths, series of breaths. And it's really thinking about, what do I feel? Can I feel the ridges, of my fingerprints? And when I'm moving them together, which one feels a little stronger than the other? As I'm moving them, is one more sensitive, right? And really, you're your brain is doing this analysis of the piece, and what that forces your brain to do is it forces at least to flush the mind chatter, the stuff that's really bothering you, off to the side. And what I found is I have this one awesome person I'm coaching. I've had him for several years as a coaching client, and he says in staff meetings or in meetings, particularly with my boss, I find him doing that quite a bit under the table. And he says it's really helping me maintain kind of composure, particularly when my boss has some really, really stupid ideas that I just want to jump upon. And by maintaining that and kind of taking that breath and that pause, he said, we've had much better conversations. Yeah. So take the time.
Yeah.
Those little investments are building those additional neural pathways in your brain. And you can't just do it like once a week. You have to do it on a regular basis. And I found my trigger is when I'm getting ready to go into something new or different, like this meeting, the 2 minutes before, I'll do some breathing or tactile. There's a whole bunch of different ones you can do that Shirzad talks about in his book, Positive Intelligence. Or you can just Google mindfulness activities. You'll get 1,000 different ones. Pick one that works for you, right? And taking those regular breaks. And here's the reason people don't do this, right? And there's some really good psychology research here. The people that don't do that is that all of these activities are correlational and not causational. Most of the things that our brain wants is causational. Like if I do an hour of this, I can see instant hour of results, right? If I do, an hour of push-ups or 20 minutes or whatever it is, the next time I'll be able to do 2 more or whatever. They want that correlation. And most of the things, in order to really, really build your brain, most people want causation. Most of the things that build your brain are correlational, that you're not going to see the advantage over time. And I always tell the individuals that I put through the PQ program, we run a six-week positive intelligence program. When we put them through the program, is trust the process. You have to trust the process. Don't evaluate it today. We're going to evaluate it today as a baseline. And I'm not going to ask you, each week are you making progress? The progress happens at different points of time for different people. We're going to ask you all at the end of the program, what has changed. But you have to be able to maintain that consistency where you're doing it. And we're talking just about doing, 30 seconds on a regular basis. It's training your brain so that when you see that conflict or you anticipate the conflict or the challenge or whatever, that your brain immediately says, okay, we're going to sit back, and rather than frantically think about all the things that are going to happen, we're going to sit back, we're going to flush that out, and I'm going to build a little bit more of that highway, put that next 100 yards of concrete in there, and then I'm going to jump into it. And if you can do that, I can guarantee you that from a correlational perspective, that at some point in time, it won't happen regularly. Most people say, oh, it takes 21 days to build a habit. That's really not accurate. It's more like 67 days. So it takes much longer. If you do this on a regular basis and you're honest, you can get there.
I like it. All right. Mindfulness. Let's make sure we get out there and take care of that, people. All right. So Kevin, and hopefully I'm fine saying Kevin.
Yes.
I don't want to
please.
disrespect
Please. I'm very, very informal.
Okay. Hey, what's one question that I didn't ask that you wish I had?
I guess one question would be is, can everyone be a leader? And should everyone be a leader? Maybe that's 2 questions or a second part of a question. And I would say many of the people that I've coached have moved into management positions in the corporate world, organizational world, who really should be, because I mostly coach technical people, engineers, scientists,
Yeah.
computer programmer types, and in the normal corporate world is, you do a great job at coding for 10 years and then you're rewarded with a team of 10 people, right? Uh, and your real passion is in doing coding. Some people get rewarded that way. Other people recognize, hey, in order to advance my career, I can't keep doing coding, so I have to start managing people. And many people decide usually for a financial basis, they decide they have to do that. And what I would tell you is really listen to the stuff that speaks to you, energizes you, makes you want to do more of. And for me, it was much more about building teams, working with people, helping people coach, and moving from an individual contributor, either as a design engineer or as a marketing engineer, or as a project manager, or a product engineer, moving into that management position was something, because I could see the value of developing people and I love to do it and I wanted to learn more about doing that. That was a good path for me. But I see many of these other experts in areas that recognize, hey, my trajectory and my money, right, bonus and stock and those kind of things are not going to be able to get to this next level unless I go manage people. So I guess I'm going to go have to do that. My recommendation is don't do that, right? Don't do that to you, because it's going to be stressful for you, and don't do that to the people that you're going to manage. Just because if your heart's not in it, your passion's on it, you're not willing to work on it, right, and really take it. And most, a lot of engineers in particular, a lot of technical people think, well, if you can do this technically well, you mean, how hard can it be to manage people? Management and leadership is really there's a very, very deep science, right? That's built around a lot of psychological elements. And if that's something you're interested in, you want to learn about and you respect, management leadership is a great position for you. If it's something that you just think, oh, I'll just keep doing my coding, and then I'll just manage a team, when I've got some spare time or when I have to do that annual review, that's a bad place to be. So that would be the thing that I think most people need to think about. And sometimes it's hard, particularly, if you're haven't gotten to that level and your mortgage at 6 or 7% is kind of eating up most of your paycheck, and you realize, oh, I could get a little bit more by being a manager. I'd say resist that at all possibility, at all, at any time you can.
Yeah. Great answer. Great thing. Yeah. I won't even add to that, because no, that is a consideration, right? Because a lot of people are like, oh, I want to lead people, but it's work.
Yeah.
It's work. It's a lot of work, and you really should care. Right. The one thing that the military instilled in me and a lot of other service people is that you're developing leaders as well. And, when you get into civilian side, or the real world, as we called it when I was in the military, I had a belief that everybody was cutthroat and everybody was out for themselves. And, and how do I have my mentality or my mindset that I have and incorporate it in here? And thankfully, the place that I did start working at when I left the military, they had a similar mentality as it was in the military, where there was a team effort. Everyone's moving in the same direction. No one's trying to cut their legs underneath the other person. So maybe it was just the industry that I'm in, working in and supply chain, stuff like that. But, but the point is, Kevin just mentioned it, you need to think about that stuff, because it is like another job, but not a job. Like, you really need to be emotionally invested in the development and the success of the people who you are managing and who you are leading. That's just my take on it.
I think that's a good take. And you're talking about corporate culture here, organizational culture, right? Make sure that you're in a culture that feeds you rather than drains you.
All right, Kevin, how can the listeners connect with you and start working on their positive intelligence? today?
Well, I would encourage anybody to send me an email. You can reach me at kevin@magnaleadership.com. That's our leadership firm. And if you want to talk about, get recommendations or challenges that you have, I love to talk about this stuff. This is maybe my passion. I spent the last 30 years kind of trying to develop, great leadership tips and so forth. Hopefully I've shared a few with you already. And my promise to anyone that connects with me is you will absolutely get zero sales pitch. I will not pitch you of like to hire me or use my firm or whatever. What I'll do is I'll listen to you. I'll give you some best tips. And if there's some additional things that we can work with, in the future, great. And if not, and I've kind of helped, remove a roadblock for you, that's a reward enough for me.
Yeah. All right, Dr. Kevin Gazzara. Hopefully I said it right. I always say that, man, because I used to be so good when I was it wasn't that long ago, which is funny, but when I was in the military, I was around a lot of people, a lot of different, people from everywhere. And so I was immersed in like different names and different ethnicities and different cultures and all this. So I prided myself on just looking at a name, figuring out where they were from and being able to say it. And now I just totally lost it. So I'm constantly saying, I hope I said that right. I hope I said it right. So hopefully I said it right.
You did. Yes.
Yeah. But thank you. Hey, look, you reminded me that high performance doesn't come from more pressure. It comes from mental clarity and purpose. And I just want to thank you for being a guest on Hindsight the Podcast. And maybe we can do this again.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much, Lee.
Absolutely. And look, if something in this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend. Take that next step in your own mindset journey. And don't forget to subscribe and follow us at hindsightthepodcast.com. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Hey, thanks for joining me here on Hindsight the Podcast. I'm your host, Lee Jones. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I did. And while I have you here, why don't you take your mouse, go over and click on that subscribe button. No, not right there. Over to the right. Down, right there. Boom. Thank you. Now, thank you for subscribing to Hindsight the Podcast. I'm your host, Lee Jones.